So thank you all for being here. I'm going to be talking today about the work that we've been doing in AI for social impact. So, so for the past 15 years, my team and I have been focused on advancing AI and multi-agent systems research, social impact, particularly focusing on topics of public health, conservation, and public safety and security. The key challenge, how to optimize our limited intervention resources. So I'll just jump right into some of the lessons that we have learned. First, achieving social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand. What I mean here is AI for social impact doesn't just mean taking known AI techniques and applying them in social contexts. Let's take the example of public health, where we have large populations to serve and limited number of public health resources. Concrete example is work we've done with youth experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles, where harnessing the social networks of these youth, we are able to show that our influence maximization algorithms are far more effective in spreading HIV information and reducing HIV risk behaviors compared to traditional approaches. But this work required innovation in the area of social network influence maximization. With respect to conservation, we have large conservation areas to protect limited number of range. Concrete example is work we've done in Uganda, Cambodia, and now in Belize, where harnessing past poaching data, we are able to predict where poachers set traps or snares. And for the past several years, have been able to remove thousands, if not tens of thousands of these snares. With respect to public safety and security, we've contributed a new model called Stackelberg security games and contributed new algorithms that have been used by security agencies in the United States, such as to patrol different ports, Boston, New York, Los Angeles, or which flight should carry air marshals and others. These may seem like very diverse application areas, but they are connected together by underlying research in multi-agent systems. Today's talk, I'll focus on public health and conservation. The second lesson is all of this work involves partnerships with communities, with nonprofits, and with government. Our goal is to avoid being gatekeepers to AI technology for social impact. The third lesson is that this entire data to deployment pipeline is important when we talk about AI for social impact. We begin our work by immersing ourselves in the domain, trying to understand the kind of data that are available, the kind of problems faced by a nonprofit. A predictive model then makes predictions on which of the cases faced by a nonprofit might be low risk or high risk. Following that, a prescriptive algorithm makes recommendations on which cases to intervene on, since we don't have enough resources to intervene on all of the high-risk cases. And finally, field testing and deployment is crucial because social impact itself is a key objective here. If there is no social impact, then it is not AI for social impact. So with that introduction, I'm going to talk to you today. This is the outline: 4 projects, 3 in public health, 1 in conservation. Each project is a combination of a technique with a particular domain. The first project comes to you from work we have been doing in Google Research India. The others are projects that are ongoing here at Harvard. And I'll highlight papers from the last 5 years on these projects. I'll focus more on real world results with more simulations being presented in papers. And highlight the role of the lead PhD student or researcher by putting up their picture in the top right-hand corner of the slide on which their work is shown. So let's start with maternal and child care as the first project. The motivation here is the United Nations Sustainable Development Target that by 2030, the maternal mortality ratio should be below 70 per 100,000 live births. That is, mothers dying during childbirth or soon after should be below 70. That's the UN target. If you look at where we are today, Western Europe and the US obviously lower than the UN target. But in the developing world, for example, in India, the numbers are much higher. The rates are decreasing, but still in India, for example, it's above 100. That's where we'll begin. What that implies is that a woman dies in childbirth every 20 minutes in India. 4 out of 10 children end up being too thin or short. We've been very fortunate to be working with a nonprofit called Arman, which works with 26 million beneficiaries or mothers in India, is active in 19 states. And we are very inspired by the founder of Arman, Dr. Aparna Hegde, saying that, you can see this on their website, pregnancy is not a disease, childhood is not an ailment, dying due to a natural life event is not acceptable. I met Dr. Hegde in the summer of 2019 in Mumbai, and we agreed we should work together, but we should do something with AI, but what can we do and how? So after some discussion, we arrived at the problem of program adherence to their mobile health M-Mitra program. It's a weekly 2-minute automated voice message that is sent to mothers from the time the mother registers all the way to the time the baby is 1 year old. It's a 2-minute message that goes out something like, you are 3 months into your pregnancy, you should use this health supplement. Or your baby is 3 weeks old, get the baby vaccinated. Arman, through RCTs, has shown that there are significant benefits to mothers if they listen to the messages given by this mobile health program. 2 million women have enrolled in this program so far. So where do we come in? The problem is that 30 to 40% of the mothers may enroll, but may become low listeners over time or drop out of the program. To understand the situation, we were fortunate to be taken around on a tour by Arman to their hospital sites where they registered the mothers, the locations where these mothers live. Now, I've grown up in Mumbai, so I have some understanding of these locations, but visiting these homes gave a better understanding. These are families that live way below the international poverty line. And so therefore, there's significant pressures and not difficult to see that they may become low listeners. So what can we do? Arman has this service call center from where health workers can call these mothers to try to motivate them to remain in the program. The question then becomes how to optimize this limited resource, because they cannot call every single mother. So essentially, we have a large number of beneficiaries, 100,000 mothers that are enrolled in the program at a time. Health messages, automated health messages sent to all 100,000 mothers, but several of them may not listen to these messages and may be on the verge of becoming low listeners. We can call 1,000 mothers per week to give service calls to. And our goal is to maximize the total number of health messages that get listened to out of all the messages that are sent. To understand this, consider this single health worker who has 5 mothers under her care who have been sent automated health messages. 4 of them have not listened to those health messages, which is shown in red. 1 has, which is shown in green. And now the health worker in this case can call 2 mothers to try to motivate them to keep listening. So which 2 mothers should she call? She could say, I'm going to call the first 2 mothers. This turns out to be a good choice. They turn to green, and there's another mother which also turns to. Now, next week, again, the health worker has to decide which 2 mothers to call. In this case, she chooses the last 2. But this turns out to be a bad choice, because not only do these 2 mothers don't turn to green, but additional 2 green who were listening have also stopped listening. The point here is that a service call may not change beneficiary state, but beneficiaries may change state on their own. And we have to prioritize 1,000 beneficiaries per week. We try to solve this problem by casting it as a restless bandit. We're trying to pull K out of N arms per week. So for those who may not know what's a restless bandit, each arm is a Markov decision problem. Each arm models 1 mother or beneficiary. A mother might be in a bad state. She has not listened to an automated voice message, or a good state. She has listened. We have actions to intervene, give a service call, or not intervene, no service call. And then we have modeling of behavior based on the transition matrix, transition probabilities. For example, a mother might, with intervention, have a high probability of going from bad state to good state of 0.8, but without intervention, that same probability might be 0.2. So in reality, of course, we have 100,000 such mothers, so 100,000 such arms, 100,000 such MDPs, and we have to pick 1,000. This problem is already p-space hard, and you can imagine that this becomes a difficult problem given the scale. So one way to solve this problem is to compute the Whittle index of each arm. So Whittle index informally computes the benefit of intervention. More formally, it's the minimum subsidy you provide in a state to the passive action, no intervention action, such that the Q value of the passive action becomes equal to the Q value of the active action. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to how to compute this Whittle index for any random problem, but we have, fortunately, an algorithm that fit this problem that was defined in Chen et al. 2016 to choose top K arms. We have to prove indexability for asymptotic optimality, which we also did. So at this point, we are almost ready to apply our solution. However, there's one big obstacle. Normally, it is assumed that the transition probabilities are given, but here we don't have the transition probabilities, the behaviors of the mothers given to us. What we do have is past data of beneficiaries, the features of these mothers, that is age, income, education level, etc., and their engagement sequence. The mother was in a bad state, was not listening basically, and then there was intervention, but she remained in a bad state. Or she was in a bad state, there was intervention, she went to a good state. So given these features and engagement sequences, we cluster these probabilities of these transition probabilities of different mothers, and then learn a mapping from features to cluster centers. So essentially, given a certain age, income level, education, we know we can map it to a certain behavior in terms of transition probability, so that when a new mother with the same age, income, etc. arrives, we predict which cluster she should belong to. And based on that, compute the Whittle index. And based on that, we can choose the top K mothers to call. So at this point, the clustering helps us because it speeds up the Whittle index computation, because if there's 100,000 mothers, but only 50 clusters, instead of computing 100,000 Whittle indices, we are only computing it 50 times. And clustering also compensates for the lack of data that we have, because there's sparse data about interventions that we have. So with that, we then did a study, a field study with 23,000 beneficiaries. So this, as far as we know, first large-scale application of Restless Bandits for public health. We divided these 23,000 into three groups. 7,667 were in the Restless Bandit group, 7,667 in the round-robin group, and the remaining in the current standard of care group. So in each group, we pulled 225 arms for all 225 mothers. In the Restless Bandit group, the 225 were ones with the highest Whittle index. In the round robin group, we call the first 225, then the next 225, etc. In the current standard of care group, no calls were going out. That's the current standard care. Now we want to know how many more health messages are listened to over the current standard of care group in the RMAP group and in the round robin group. And here's what we find. On the x-axis here are weeks, and on the y-axis, how many more cumulatively messages are listened to in each of these groups. So in the RMAP group shown in blue, 600 more messages are listened to cumulatively over the current standard of care group. In the round robin group shown in orange, there is very little improvement. In fact, we can show that with statistical significance, the p-value shows that the Restless Bandit versus current standard of care is statistically significant. Round robin versus current standard of care is not so. So what do we take away from this experiment? First, it's important to optimize service calls. And secondly, the Restless Bandit approach cuts by more than 30% the drop-off rates over the current standard of care. So given this result, we've now deployed this system with Arman. So I'm not going to go into details of this whole architecture, but the system is called Saheli. It means a friend in Hindi. It's also an acronym. The point being that we have worked extremely hard to come up with a good acronym here. This We have served with this architecture so far 100,000 beneficiaries and continue to assist more. Given this deployment, Dr. Aparna Hegde was interviewed, and there's a YouTube video if you can want to look at that. If you want to look at that, AI for Social Good in partnership with Arman, where she says we are able to reach out to more and more women each week and get them back into the fold and save lives because of AI. In the same video are testimonies from some of the beneficiaries, and here's one that I wanted to show. So this is being spoken in Marathi, which is also my mother tongue. So it's particularly satisfying to see this mother responding in this way to the service call. So we want to understand, why did service calls help? So we surveyed 500 service call receivers. Did service call improve your listenership? About 40% said they didn't, 60% said yes, it improved. Why did it improve? Among those 60%, more than 70% said because they got more information about the mobile health program and Mitra. So they got better motivation to continue listening. Could we have used a simpler benchmarks? So we, for example, could we have used the greedy algorithm rather than the Whittle index algorithm? And what we find here is that in simulation, because we have collected all this data, we can construct a simulation. And in this simulation, compare our different strategies. We can see that, again, in repeating the same type of experiment in simulation here, that the Whittle index approach would have led to better results than the greedy approach. In terms of next steps, an exciting next step is decision-focused learning. I talked to you earlier about this data to deployment pipeline, where in one step, which the learning step, we are learning features to transition probabilities. So we are trying to find as accurately as possible this mapping from features to transition probabilities. And then second step, we optimize. We try to find the top K beneficiaries such that we maximize decision quality. However, maximizing learning accuracy does not equal maximizing decision quality. In fact, we observe this in real life in this actual domain. The two data sets, orange data set 1, the predictive accuracy is higher. We were able to more accurately predict the transition probabilities of the mothers. The blue, it's lower. But when we actually go and deploy these in these data sets, go and call these mothers based on what has been predicted, what we find is that there's a mismatch. The blue data set, even though we are less accurate, leads to more messages being listened to by. So why might this happen? We find that there's a data limitation that accounts for this. So here's a illustrative example. On the x-axis are features. On the y-axis are transition probability. So blue dots are all the low-risk mothers. There's a large number of them in this data. Red are all the high-risk mothers. To the left of this orange line are the low risk. To the right are all the high risk. And now if we say we want to first learn as accurately as possible, we will learn that in this linear regressor, this green line, which is able to predict more accurately the blue dots, which are more in number. We get higher learning accuracy, but low decision quality because we miss predicting all the red dots, which are high-risk mothers. Decision-focused learning directly modifies the loss function to maximize decision quality. So what it ends up learning is the regressor line shown, which is more accurately able to predict the high-risk mothers. It has a lower learning accuracy, but higher decision quality. So we've conducted another experiment with 9,000 beneficiaries, comparing the two-stage model, which was trying to first learn accurately and then choose the top K mothers, versus a decision-focused approach, where in the learning stage, we directly maximize decision quality. What we find here is, in terms of predictive accuracy, in terms of predicting the transition probabilities, the two-stage model is more accurate. But in terms of actual deployment result, as to who listened to more health messages, the decision-focused learning approach leads to more health messages being listened to. So this decision-focused learning approach is what we are now going to deploy with Arman. And just to understand what might be going on here, if we look at the Whittle indexes predicted by decision-focused learning, and it's trying to choose the top K, essentially it separates out the prediction of the top K Whittle indices, whereas with this two-stage model, which is just trying to achieve higher predictive accuracy and then compute Whittle indices, we see a single mountain here of Whittle indices rather than separating out the two groups. So there's a lot more to do if anybody's interested. One of the ideas here is more robust restless bandits. Given limited data, instead of predicting precise transition probabilities, we may only arrive at intervals of what those probabilities might be. So for example, we may say that the transition probabilities may lie for arm 1 between 0.4 and 0.7, for arm 2 between 0.2 and 0.4. Given such intervals, then we have a problem of what policy to choose, and we can use this idea of minimizing maximum regret by playing a zero-sum game against nature. So the algorithm is trying to choose arm ranking policy to perform as well as possible, and nature is trying to choose parameter settings to cause our algorithm to perform as worse as possible. This kind of a game to solve this is also difficult, because if you imagine there's 100,000 arms and we're trying to choose 1,000 out of that, the number of policies, the number of ways in which we can choose 1,000 out of 100,000, of course, is very, very large. Nature is trying to choose parameter settings from continuous intervals. So nature has a very large number of values to choose from. This game, representing it in memory itself, is difficult, let alone trying to solve it. So we solve this problem by using a double oracle approach. We initialize the game with a small number of strategies on both sides. And then the planner's oracle will provide its best response, adding one more policy. Nature's oracle will add its best response, adding one more policy. And in this way, we grow the game until convergence. And often the convergence happens without expanding the whole game. So we applied this approach to Arman, and in simulation are able to show that the regret would be lower, more messages would be listened to in the worst case. But this is just one possible direction. Another one is to look at other kinds of diseases where adherence is important, and restless bandits can help with adherence. One such disease is tuberculosis. It's a global disease, but in India alone, 500,000 people die because of this. 3 million are infected every year. People have to take pills for 6 months to recover. I get tired if I'm given these pills to take for, say, 6 days. 6 months is a very long time. And so people will stop taking these pills and drop out of treatment, which is not only bad for them, but can lead to drug-resistant bacteria. To prevent people from dropping off, again, we have health workers who are tasked from call centers to call patients to keep having them taking these medicines. So if you imagine this health worker, she has under her care, some hundreds of patients. Has to choose to call some number every day. So she may call here 3 patients. 2 of them say, yeah, I took my medicine last night. The third one says, I didn't. And now the health worker encourages them, hey, you have to take your medicine. And then having done that, she has to decide who to call tomorrow. This problem is very similar to the problem I just showed you of maternal and child care, except each arm is a POMDP. We don't know the state of the patient until we call them. So addressing these kinds of POMDPs is also an interesting challenge. We've presented these results in NeurIPS 2020, where when an arm is not played, we have no observation. We update the belief state about the arm. When the arm is played, when we call the patient and the patient says, I took my medicine last night, uncertainty collapses. Now we know the patient was in a green state. Or I didn't take my medicine, uncertainty collapses. We know the patient was in a red state. This collapsing uncertainty is why we call these bandits collapsing bandits. And we can exploit this to not only provide results about indexability, but in simulation, we are able to show that our model performs significantly better in runtime compared to the best baseline without giving up much in solution quality. For those who remain interested in this area of work, there are other important challenges. For example, so far, I've only talked about 2 action RMAP, either you call a person or not. But you can imagine there are multiple ways of intervening, text a person, send a person to their home, etc. And so when you have 2+ actions, this leads to multi-action index, and this requires, especially if there is no prior data for online learning, an important challenge. So lots of activity in this area would be very useful for real-world applications. In terms of future steps for 2023, our goal is to reach 1 million beneficiaries with Arman. Another program called Kilkari, run by Government of India, is very similar to this problem with Arman, except it's 10 times larger, where mothers, expecting mothers or with newborns are given these voice calls with health information. They're talking here about 5.28 crore. That's 52 million messages being sent out. And so this is a massive scale problem of trying to make sure people adhere to the messages that are being sent out. Another problem we are looking at with an NGO called Kushi Baby is malnutrition. And our recent paper at ICHKAI 2022 is work we've done with the NGO called Help Mom in Nigeria for similar challenges of maternal and child care. So I'm going to take a short break here for questions before I move on to the next topic. So maybe if there are 1 or 2 questions, I can answer them at this point.
I do have a quick question. I thought it was interesting that you could take such a, I guess, like, in a sense, like a very high dimensional nature view, and then encode it into like this type of problem formulation. Like, I'm imagining like a call center calls a mother, and it's not like the mother will always pick up because, well, what if she just like doesn't want to pick up because it's like an unknown number or things like that. So is that like part of the model, or is it like, is something built into the model that allows you to like consider these uncertainties?
So the past data that we have will have data that a mother of similar features, age, income level, etc., was given a call. And if she didn't pick up the service call, it will be reflected in the transition probability that the mother did not transition from a non-engaging to an engaging state after the call. So because of that, you're exactly right that mothers may not pick up service calls, but because such data existed in the past, we are relying on it to provide good predictions about similar mothers not picking up calls in the future.
So there is like a qualitative categorization of all the different transition probabilities, or some of them just have like unknown transition probabilities that you let the algorithm take care of?
It's the latter. So we have data on, so we've created these clusters. And so we have data on some of these clusters. That's, plenty of data in some cases. But in terms of intervention data, for some of the mothers or some categories of mothers, we may not have intervention data. And there we have to essentially induce it based on, some kind of imputation or something that says, we take the intervention probabilities to be higher than at least the passive probabilities. So there's some ways to kind of heuristically infer these probabilities and work with that. And that has worked out well. I'm sure there's ways to improve upon it as well.
Thank you. I have a question.
Please.
So for the example that you showed that you had to modify the loss to take the decision-making side into account, and that resulted in better decision accuracy. I wonder what that is doing is similar to robust learning. For example, optimizing the loss of the lower quantile, for example, is that more is it doing more complicated than that, or is it the same effect?
I mean, this decision-focused learning is essentially differentiating through the optimization problem and bringing the gradient information back from solving the actual objective that you want to solve at the end of the optimization problem. And so essentially that's what's going on here. And so instead of concentrating on just learning accuracy, mean squared error, or what have you, it's just essentially how can we get information from the actual objective that we have. That's what's going on here.
I got a quick question. What made you decide to start officially pursuing this specific project?
So I have been focused on AI for social impact for past 15 years, as I said. For this particular project, I mean, I'm originally from India, from Mumbai, and having an NGO that was working directly in Mumbai for maternal and child care seemed like a very important problem to be working on. And so that essentially is the origin of this particular problem. But all of the work I do is in the same style. So picking social problems that are immediately relevant and working to develop AI solutions for that, as you'll see in the next problem as well that I'll discuss. But there might be a broader question there, which I'm happy to get back to a little later on, if you wish. So let me go on to the next problem that I want to cover, which is HIV prevention. This is a problem that I started working on while I was in Los Angeles, working at the University of Southern California. So homelessness is a big challenge, specifically youth experiencing homelessness. 6,000 youth sleep on the streets of Los Angeles every night. The rates of HIV amongst this population is 10 times the rates of the normal house population. And homeless shelters try to reduce the rates of HIV because they cannot reach all the 6,000 youth. They call key peer leaders, educate them about HIV prevention, expect these youth leaders to talk to their friends and their friends to talk to their friends, information to spread in the social network. This is face-to-face interactions. This is not happening over Facebook, for example. So the problem is we are given this social network. Each number here is a youth. Each edge, red edge, is a friendship edge between two youth. We have to choose some peer leaders to maximize expected number of influence nodes, information about HIV prevention. This is a picture from one of our social work colleagues educating these youth in one of the education sessions about HIV prevention. Information is supposed to spread in the social network via this independent cascade model. So if a youth C is educated about HIV, there's a probability 0.4 that youth D will be educated about HIV prevention. If D is educated, E will be educated with the probability of 0.4. Information will cascade in this fashion in the network. So the fourth lesson I want to highlight here is that lack of data and uncertainty is a key feature of AI for social impact. So I said 0.4, but the probability, propagation probability may not be known exactly. Secondly, when we ask these peer leaders to come, these influencers, not all of them may show up. These are youth in difficult circumstances. One of them may choose to run away, may have chosen to run away from the city. Another one may get arrested on the way, may have sent their friend. So we have to have multi-step dynamic policies. And the social network itself is not really known to us. All we can do is have a limited query budget that we can expose a small fraction of the social network. And yet we have to find these key peer leaders, key influencers. So I'm going to sketch some ways that we solve these problems. First, I said that the probability 0.4 is not exactly known. We can imagine that the sample from some distribution, but the mean of this distribution may itself be not known, and we can model it as lying within some interval. Now, Solving this now becomes a problem of robust influence maximization, where on the algorithm side is trying to choose peer leaders to maximize influence, and nature is trying to choose parameter settings to cause the algorithm to perform as worse as possible. And again, as a zero-sum game, we are trying to maximize influence. Nature is trying to minimize, where the payoff here in this game is the ratio of the outcome of the particular choice of peer leaders to the optimal possible choice had we known nature's parameter settings ahead of time. This paper in Amos has details of the mixed strategies and pure strategies and so forth, but just to sketch a way of how we solve this game, again, we have the same problem. If you imagine a social network of 400 nodes and we have 40 peer leaders to choose, we have 400 choose 40 policies on the influencer side. Again, nature is trying to choose parameter settings from continuous intervals. Massive scale game, not possible to represent in memory. But with the double oracle approach, we can start with a small number of strategies on both sides. And then the influencer oracle will add its own policy. It's the best response. Nature will add its own policy, its best response. The game grows in this fashion until convergence. And we can show that it converges with approximation guarantees, even though often it's a very small number of iterations via which the game converges. So that's how we get robust policies. The second problem is that the network itself is not known. We can imagine asking our social work colleagues to go sit in a homeless shelter and figure out what is the social network of the entire set of youth, but this is a very difficult task. Instead, a simpler way is that if we can ask 15% of the youth, who are your top 5 friends? Some kind of a sampling algorithm. Then choose peer leaders to spread influence based on just this sample, such that the performance of our influence maximization is similar to the optimal possible had we known the entire social network in advance. That's what we want. To address this problem, we have developed a sampling algorithm where we sample nodes randomly and estimate sizes of the communities that the nodes belong to and choose seeds from the largest K communities. In our AAAI paper, we show that we can provide some guarantees, but I'm going to focus here instead on the experiment we ran. Our algorithm is called Change. It has network sampling, robust policy generation, and it chooses peer leaders. We ran a study with 750 youth experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles in collaboration with Professor Eric Rice in the School of Social Work at USC. There's 3 arms in the study. Change is our algorithm, 250 youth in this arm. Degree centrality, 250 youth. These are chosen as the most popular youth are chosen to spread influence. This is what is traditionally used in these homeless shelters. Control group, there is nobody spreading any influence. And now we want to see at the end of 1 month and at the end of 3 months, is there an actual reduction in HIV risk behaviors? So each algorithm, 250 youth can select peer leaders using its own method, and then we are comparing the results. This work was done in collaboration with 3 homeless shelters in LA, My Friend's Place, Los Angeles LGBT Center, and Safe Place for Youth. First large-scale application of influence maximization for public health. And so here's what we are showing at the end of 1 month. In terms of reduction of condomless anal sex, which is one of the HIV risk behaviors, we see that change causes more than 30% reduction. Degree centrality and control, there is no difference. At the end of 3 months, degree centrality begins to catch up, but change is still superior. The point here is that the fact that change causes a reduction faster is important because this is an HIV risk behavior, and it's also a dynamic population where people come and go, and therefore having this reduction happen faster is important. We can also look at other risk behaviors, reduction in condomless vaginal sex, and again, we see that change is superior. There's statistical significance results in our AAAI paper and Journal of AIDS paper, and here's what our collaborator had to
kind of like marrying this tech world with this social service world, like how we can kind of go deeper and give.
There are lots of interesting issues to pursue here, ensuring fairness in influence spread because there can be disparities. This is a topic that we've been pursuing. Another is using reinforcement learning rather than these hand-drawn algorithms to train on previous graphs and use those as policies to choose peer leaders. That's another, but these are all currently being tried out in simulation. Testing them in the real world remains an issue for future work. The third topic, very briefly, that I wanted to cover is COVID-19 agent-based modeling for COVID-19 dynamics. I'll cover that. And then last 5 minutes, I'll talk about wildlife conservation, and that will be the end of the talk. And then we can take any more questions you may have. So 2020 begins some spring when the whole world shut down. We started collaborating with our colleagues here at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health on COVID-19 modeling. And I wanted to highlight one particular paper that appeared in Science Advances, because that's the one that gets picked up in popular media. And here's the work started with Professor Michael Mina, who was at the time professor in the Chan School of Public Health, asking the question of COVID testing policy. The goal was, okay, we are trying to, at that point in time, the sense was maybe we test all of the students at Harvard. So should they be tested using PCR, which is the gold standard test, which can detect very low viral concentration, but the cost of the test is high, and you may get results back in 24 hours. Or antigen strips, which we all know are these rapid tests, which require higher viral concentration. The cost is low and you get results back in 15 minutes. The idea was to test all of the students, anybody positive, you isolate them, which test should be used, this PCR or antigen strip. So Michael came to us, and so we started collaborating with him. We built a simulation. And if we could test the whole population every 3 days, and if we could get results back instantaneously, on the y-axis here are total number of infections, we can see that rapid tests perform worse. There's more infections. So we should definitely use PCR. However, if we have a 1-day delay in getting results back from PCR, rapid tests, you get results back instantaneously. Like I said, in 15 minutes, you get results from the rapid test, but in PCR, there may be a 1-day delay getting results back from the lab. That 1-day delay means 1-day delay in isolating positive individuals, and all the advantage of the the PCR tests are lost. If, as a result of cost, we can only do the test every 5 days instead of every 3 days, as with the rapid tests, again, all the advantage of the PCR test is lost. So rapid turnaround time and frequency is more critical than sensitivity for COVID-19 surveillance, favoring rapid tests. This result was picked up by the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time, etc., etc. One day we got up and found Dr. Fauci discussing our paper, which was very interesting. And all the credit to Professor Michael Mina for being such a public advocate of rapid tests and pushing it. And he's got like 1 million followers on Twitter and so forth. And so with all his public advocacy, now we see that the FDA has approved these rapid tests. Rapid tests are now widely available to the public. But the fact that we could play some role in helping Michael make his case by providing computational modeling is what we are very happy with. So as I said, in the last 5 minutes or so, I wanted to give you a quick sketch of the work that we're doing for poaching prevention, and then I'll stop and take any questions. So this work is focused on trying to protect wildlife. These are my pictures from Uganda, from poaching. And whereas there's all this wonderful wildlife, there's also threats to the wildlife, snares or traps that get placed by the thousands to maim and kill this wildlife. And rangers have to patrol these parks, thousands of square kilometers patrolled by hundreds of rangers, so extremely difficult, trying to look for these snares. And you can see how difficult this is for rangers. To assist them, we can imagine, which we have done, is to divide up the park in 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid square and pinpoint which grid square are high risk of having traps. We have 14 years of, in our initial test, 14 years of data from Uganda. So for each grid square, ranger patrol frequency, distance to rivers, roads, and villages, and so forth, and whether a snare was found in that grid square or not. I'm going to skip over the model we built. We did lots of simulation results in the lab, but these are not believed by our collaborators in the field. So Uganda Wildlife Authority, they wanted real world tests. So the first test we did was in fall of 2016 in Queen Elizabeth. The idea was to find new areas which the rangers had not patrolled before. And so we found these green areas, which are shown here. These we are saying you patrol here, you have not patrolled them. Clearly the green don't overlap with the red. Red is where they have found snares in the past. And we're telling them that if you patrol these, which you haven't patrolled, you're going to find new snares. And the rangers started patrolling them. Every day they would patrol and send us some email as to what happened. Initially, there was nothing. This field test just happened to be 1 month before this AMAS conference deadline, which meant if we found snares, we would be able to write a paper. If not, there wouldn't be any paper. And now, after a while, the rangers sent back an email saying that found a poached elephant with tusks at all. So poachers were active in the area. We were too late to save this elephant, but at least the machine learning system was pointing us in the right direction. Then next day, they found a whole elephant snare roll and removed. So poachers were active in the area. They were killing elephants, but before they could kill the next set of elephants, we removed the elephant snare roll, hopefully saving lives of elephants. Then there was a whole set of antelope snares that got removed. I was a little pessimistic as to how effective our test will be. So I had promised all of the students to motivate them a free drink for every snare found. But at this point, they were like, okay, we don't want any more drinks. This successful pilot test led to us doing a much more extensive test in 3 national parks, Queen Elizabeth and Murchison Falls in Uganda and Sri Park Wildlife Sanctuary in Cambodia. In each, we selected 24 areas. Some we predicted are high risk. More snares are found. More snares will be found. Some we predicted will be low risk. Less snares will be found. Now, the point here was that these are all infrequently patrolled areas. So we wanted to show that we can discriminate between high risk and low risk areas, even among those that are infrequently patrolled. And then we asked rangers to go patrol these parks for 6 months in these areas and come back and tell us what they found. And where we predicted high risk, more snares were found. Where we predicted low risk, less snares were found. In fact, in the Sri Park Wildlife Sanctuary, these are pictures from our captures of snares. Our system is called PAWS. So 2018, they had 100 snares per month. 2019, when PAWS was deployed, more than 500 snares per month. In 2021, in March alone, 1,000 snares were found using PAWS as a way of predicting where snares would be found. So this, I'm going to skip over some of the other challenges and come to the main point. So there's some game theoretic work that we are doing to build on the work that I just mentioned. I'll come to the main point here, which is PAWS, which is our system now, is integrated with SMART. SMART is this software collaboration of 13 wildlife conservation agencies, WWF, WCS, etc. And that's the software rangers around the globe use to note down where poaching has happened. So they have all this data, but that data is only used to look at the past or where poaching has happened in the past. PAWS uses all of that data to make predictions of where poaching may happen in the future, where traps may be set in the future. And so we are thrilled to give some assistance to rangers around the globe. They can download the software in national parks around the globe and start using it to make predictions. And we are thrilled to see this being used now in Belize, in Vietnam, in Zambia. So these are our collaborators from 2022. Our team was just in Belize looking at how PAWS can assist. And that's our team, pictures of our team's visit to Belize. And so this is an exciting time. I'm going to, just in the interest of time, skip over all of the areas of future work, such as use of bandit algorithms and use of drones, which is to automatically in real time detect poachers versus animals, and then use the drones for deceptive signaling. I'm just going to draw some of the lessons and then end there. First, achieving social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand. AI for social impact doesn't mean we just take AI tools and apply them as is. Partnerships with governments, nonprofits, and local communities is crucial in AI for social impact. We don't want to be engaged in helicopter science with AI for social impact. We go into a community, take their data, publish a paper, and run away, because this is definitely going to spoil our relationship with this organization. So next set of AI researchers wouldn't benefit. AI for social impact is about the whole data to deployment pipeline. It's not just about improving algorithms. It's important to step out of the lab and into the field. It's important to embrace interdisciplinary research, social work, conservation, and others. And lack of data is the norm. It's a feature. It's a part of our project strategy, and shouldn't be the case that we say, okay, there's no data, we can't quite do this project. So thank you for listening. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to stop there. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you. Thank you.
Is the data for the poaching, the patrolling stuff, is the data available publicly?
It's not available publicly. It's available with SMART. So that consortium controls the data. We are very careful to not publish the data or the maps we find,
Okay.
so forth, for secrecy. But if you collaborate with SMART, they will be, they'll be willing to give you data.
Thank you.
I guess, could you speak at all about what, like, the qualitative differences between the places they were looking for traps before versus the places they were looking for traps after using the AI?
So the traps that were found previously before the AI was used, and traps that were found after, is that what the question is?
I guess more about like the locations. Is it like, if you look at, I don't know, migration paths of animals or farming poles, or is there like some, like, I guess, what's the change in distribution search that caused them to get that performance?
I think, I mean, that's a really good question. I don't know that I have a very systematic answer, but I can give you anecdotally some particular things we have found. So for example, in Cambodia, there's a part of the park, it's the park we have is right at the border with Vietnam. And there's a part of the park in the north corner where there was no patrolling happening under the assumption that it's being patrolled by the border patrol. And so there's no need for rangers to go there. But our AI system predicted that there were snares there, and indeed there were. And so these are situations where it seems like human intuition, or there's some set of assumptions that are made by humans, rangers, as to where snares might be or not. And the AI system is able to point out that there's some, like in this case, where human assumptions are just flawed in making cases. So it's asking them to go to newer places. And that's important, because if all we did was, okay, you found some snares in the past, just go back there and that's where you'll find more snares, that isn't as useful to them. The main challenge is just that we have a very small number of rangers and a massive area to patrol. And so we really need ways to pinpoint where to go, because there's just no way they can really just extensively patrol that whole park and just comb the area or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. We also have a question in chat.
Yes, I'm looking at it. So this is
Yeah, I guess I can. Thanks for the wonderful talk. This was really great. Broadly, how are problems formulated by incorporating domain knowledge from the nonprofit organization? For example, in the case of mothers receiving prenatal information, how are decisions made on problems that need to be focused and would result in maximum social impact?
a wonderful question. I think here we rely very much on our partnership with the nonprofit, right from the very beginning, being in their community, being with them, going to their offices, going to their locations, talking to not only the head, but also people throughout the organization. And based on these conversations, arrive at some understanding of what they see as a major problem. And that's how problems get formulated. There is a set of questions we ask about each nonprofit that we engage with, whether this is the right nonprofit to be working with, such as, Do they have data? Will AI help? Will they be able to pilot our solution? If we come up with a solution, will they be able to scale up this solution? So there are all these other factors that we take into account when we get into a partnership in the first place. But specifically with respect to making decisions on what problem to solve, it's very much an act of this deep partnership with the current, the local nonprofit and working with them. And sometimes it is the case that we've been to a country where the minister in charge will say something like, yeah, we need AI to help our, protect our wildlife, all of that. And then you go down the chain and go to the rangers, and the rangers say, we don't need AI, we just need better shoes. And that's, in that case, you realize that maybe this is not an organization where AI is of help, and we don't need, going to the topic of problem, well, there's no AI problem that we need to focus on here in this case. Thank you. Great. If there are no further questions, thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate the invitation, and thank you for all the questions so far. Really appreciate it.